study of the book of Nehemiah. Tonight we get into some serious building. We're not going to finish it up in these two chapters. We'll have to move on the weeks for that, but we're going to see the building get started, get off in a good way in spite of opposition. So in just a few moments we'll look at Nehemiah chapters 3 and 4. But before we begin our study, let's have prayer. Heavenly Father, we are thankful as always for being able to come together here tonight for the purpose that we do, for the ability that you give us to come here and be blessed by studying and by encouraging one another. We ask your blessings upon our study tonight of the example of Nehemiah. May we learn good things from him about how to work and to accomplish goals for you. We'd ask you to be with everyone that is on our minds tonight, dealing with healing, with grief, or with other problems. We would especially pray for Misty and her family and the loss of her mother's husband. And we pray, Father, that you bless all who will be grieving because of that. Give them strength and comfort during the next few days ahead in particular. We're thankful for those of our own number who have had successful surgery, for Randy Groh and Mary Burke, where they will continue to do well and do well quickly, be recovered with the goal accomplished that was set for the surgery, and they'll return to things in a normal and a healthy way. Bless us in our studies as we continue. We're thankful in a very special way for the obedience of Yasser to the gospel last night, and we pray that you will bless him as he prepares to leave us here and go back to his family. Bless him in the Christian life that lies ahead of him. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, Nehemiah. Tonight we're going to talk about building, and I found this little picture here, and I thought it's kind of colorful and nice, but don't believe that those are the actual type stones that they used in rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. That I don't think they had too many stones like that back then. Even the best of the masons probably couldn't prepare those. But anyway, that's kind of what they were doing there. You know, the walls were in shambles, and they were trying to rebuild them. And that effort had been attempted before, ever since they were first destroyed by the Babylonians 140 or so years before. So I just thought I'd get that picture in there to kind of give us a feel for what's going on tonight. We have these outlines, and I don't know why I don't remove that click from it, just have it as one screen. But anyway, tonight we're still talking about rebuilding the physical, rebuilding walls, chapters 1 through 6. And it's amazing. You put it on airplane mode. I thought it wasn't supposed to receive anything, but it is. I'll have to do more than that next time. So rebuilding the walls, first 6 chapters. We're in 3 and 4. And then before long, we'll be talking about the rebuilding of the people, rebuilding the nation. Chapters 3 and 4, as we've had this chart for Ezra and for Nehemiah, reconstruction of the wall, beginning of the work threatened, and in the next couple of chapters after this, we'll see the work is finished. Back then, if your city did not have walls, it was at the mercy of your enemies. And that's why one of the reasons that the enemies did not like it when they saw the walls going up, and they tried in a number of ways to stop that. Remember that we're talking about a very small period of time there for all 13 chapters of Nehemiah. We don't have any gaps in the time where nothing happened for decades. Very, very short period of time coming from that, from the map up there. And the only king, the Persian king, is Artaxerxes. We talked about him at the beginning, and he is in favor of this effort that they're having to rebuild the walls. He gave them assistance. He made it possible for them to get the big wooden beams to use at the gates Nehemiah letters to authorize that. And so they're ready to go, and gave them some soldiers that came over with them. We don't know if they stayed or not. We'll think about that a little later on as we think about the opposition. But at any rate, he was totally in favor of it, and he helped as they began, excuse me, this work, and went back to Jerusalem with the group of people who went with him from previous captivity. Chapter 3 of Nehemiah. Let's just start out here and see what's going on. Then Elisha, the high priest, rose up with his brethren, the priests, and built the sheep gate. You think it's kind of odd about the high priest helping to build walls or gates? It sure sounds like he did. It sounds like almost everybody did when we read on in chapters 3 and 4. Everybody helped. This was a project for everyone. And even those who were priests, who normally would not do that kind of work, they pitched in, and including the high priest. The high priest about Jesus this time, knowing what we know about their attitudes, they would probably not get their hands dirty with anything. They would expect other people to do it. They consecrated it and hung its doors. They built as far as the Tower of the 100 and consecrated it. Then as far as the Tower of Hananel. Next to Elisha, the men of Jericho built. And next to them, Zakur, the son of Imri, built. And that's where we're going to stop. And we're going to pose this question, which is on our minds when we first start reading this. And that is, why in the world was it necessary for Nehemiah to do all this detailed announcing of who did what and where? Have you ever wondered about that thought? Why was this done? Why did God want us, all these centuries later, to know all this? Why did he just say everybody got busy, they were excited, and in 52 days they had a wall? Why did God, through Nehemiah, or Ezra, if he wrote this, we're not sure, give us all of these details? Well, we can surmise some answers, I believe, perhaps because God wanted us to know that every worker is important. Everybody's needed to do the job. Everybody should be doing the job. Now, we're not building walls today, but we're involved in the work of the Lord as we serve him. And perhaps this, if nothing else, is an example of how we are to work together as one. It's a lesson in participation. It's a lesson in unity. It's a lesson in cooperation. As far as we're told, there wasn't a single fuss among these people who said, "Well, I want that. I wanted that stone right there." No, we want it for our part of the wall. We don't have anybody saying things like that. All we read about was unity. They decided to build the wall. They decided to defend it against their enemies. They decided to work together. And it was a remarkable job that they accomplished. So perhaps God wanted us to see all these people working together, coming from all sorts of different backgrounds as far as their skills, the roles that they would play in normal life, and yet they were all working together for this one thing. Now, here is before Nehemiah's building roughly what we have. And we're not going to examine every gate. There were, I think, 10 gates and 8 towers or something like that. And we hear all about them in here. And we're not going to go in great detail on those. We are going to note here that when he starts telling us about them here in chapter 3, we start up here upper right, and we go counterclockwise as they're developed. It was an orderly fashion. It wasn't just haphazard. Well, remembering this and saying what happened, remembering this, there was a pattern there as they move around the city. Now, we're going to look at another map in just a moment, and we're going to observe some different things. I think I'll wait on my comments until then. I was going to say something, but I think I'll wait until we see those maps. Okay, here's some more. Whatever his name is, the son of Haram, and Hashab, the son of whoever, repaired another section as well as the Tower of the Ovens. The ovens is also the Tower of the Furnaces, and that's where fire was kept and could quickly be put up as a message, as a warning. They were the signal fires, you might say. And so they kept these things burning in this particular tower so that people from a distance could see it. Perhaps people throughout most all of Jerusalem could see it. And it would serve as some sort of message service. And so that's what the towers of the ovens were, towers of the furnaces, or the place where fire could easily be used for signaling. And next to him was Shallum, the son of Halahesh, the leader of the half of the district of Jerusalem, and he and his daughters made repairs. Everybody, we're talking about a job of unity here. Didn't matter what your profession was, didn't matter what your gender was. It seems that everybody who was able was out there working on those walls because they had captured the excitement of Nehemiah and the message that he brought to them. His example or whatever. You know, as I've studied and taught Nehemiah over the years, I've often wondered or thought, I wish Nehemiah had written a book on leadership with all the details in it. Now, he gives us a great book right here, Nehemiah. We can learn a lot of principles just from how he accomplished this, got the people, motivated them to accomplish this. I'd like to have a detailed book about it. You know, I did this, and here's why I did it. Here's some of the things that I confronted. Here's how I overcame them. You know, I'd love to know all of what was in Nehemiah's mind. Fortunately, we have a little bit of a structure here. I'd like to have a whole book on how he accomplished this so well. Next to them, the Tekoites from the city of Tekoa. Remember what famous prophet was from Tekoa? Amos from Tekoa. So we'll be studying about him. No, we've already studied about him, I guess, haven't we, in here? I'm not sure how order. I don't know if their order is chronological or not. Okay, but their nobles did not put their shoulders to the work of the Lord. This is the only bummer in the whole story. This is the ones who didn't work, didn't really get in there and say, I'm going to help you. Whether I'm somebody of importance or in charge or whatever, everybody else apparently said, I'll help you, even the high priest. But the nobles from Tekoa, that group of Jewish people who came to help build the walls, the leaders just weren't into it. The nobles weren't into it. And so you might ponder this question. If they had helped, maybe it would have been 50 days or 49 or 48 days. Maybe it had been even quicker than the amazing 52 days that it was. But outside of them, everybody was helping from every walk of life. And they cooperated and got it done in 52 days in a good way, even in spite of opposition. Okay, so we have all these people that help. We have the common people, we have the nobles, except for the ones from Tekoa. We have priests, Levites, we have even the high priest, we have temple workers, the Nethinim. The word is used, we can counter that back in Ezra, and it's in here again in the passages. They were did kind of the mundane work. Nothing exciting about it, not actually the offering of sacrifices, but I guess they did a lot of cleanup, a lot of preparation, a lot of storage, I don't know, things like that. There were residents of Jerusalem, Jericho, Tekoa, Gibeon, and other places. And so it seemed the Jews there, I saw one estimate, maybe 25 or 30,000 Jews who had either come back from Babylonian captivity or who were there and were totally involved in this project. Now that is an estimate. You know, some of these things are like things that Josephus wrote, who was not inspired by God and who wrote quite some time later. But that was the estimate, maybe 25, 30,000 people. Now Jerusalem didn't hold that many people, but perhaps that many people were helping with this project of rebuilding the walls. Different backgrounds, different so many things, and yet they had this common goal, and that's what brought them together. Well, it makes me think of something that we talk about a lot, we put in the bulletin. Maybe we don't talk about it as much as we should, but these are kind of our watchwords here that we've had for several years now. Every member, every task, every soul. Everybody involved, trying to identify everything that needs to be done to serve the Lord at this place with the people that we have. And we're interested in every soul, every person. It's something that should be a unifying, a cooperative goal for us in all that we do, whatever we're doing. That won't be building a wall, but there'll be all sorts of things along the way that we will be doing. And so that's kind of how I see what was going on there in Jerusalem under the leadership of Nehemiah. Okay, a little more about the wall. Again, we're going to just mention some, but we're not going to go in detail. After him, Baruch the son of Zabbai carefully repaired the other section. Carefully repaired. Doesn't matter what the other section was. The point is he carefully repaired it. From the buttress of the door to the house of Elisha the high priest. And after him, Meremoth the son of repaired another section from the door of the house. And it tells how everybody did it, but they were serious about it. Well, for one thing, they were aware of what the value would be of the wall, a sturdy wall. And then probably, you know how these days a lot of people have their names on buildings or on bricks, or, you know, somehow everybody knows who did certain things. You know, this is the work of. We even see products with little tags in them, you know, carefully inspected by, you know, Joe or whatever, or inspected by number 34. The quality of work, you know, might have come back on them. But anyway, they were drawn together to do good work, to carefully repair under situations that were challenging. Because remember, it had been left in ruins. There was some effort during the time of Zerubbabel or Ezra maybe to do it. It got stopped. And so they weren't working under the best of conditions on their construction project. And there were, if you count them up, 41 work parties, 42 sections of the wall, estimated to be, and we'll talk about why this is estimated, either 1.5 miles to 2.5 miles of wall that was built around Jerusalem. Now, the answer for that being, we don't know exactly how much Nehemiah built during this time. We just know what he intended to do was give the city protection. Now, the word carefully there, and we may read that word again. The word carefully means with zeal, with enthusiasm. And it's like our idea of on fire. We use that metaphorically. We say somebody's really excited about doing something, that they're on fire. Sometimes we say somebody, well, they're on fire for the Lord. You know, we all would like to say that about ourselves, wouldn't we? We all would want to, you know. Somebody say, are you on fire for the Lord? Well, yeah, I'm on fire for the Lord. But sometimes we see somebody and we observe their life, their words, their deeds, and we say, well, they're on fire for the Lord. Well, that's the concept of carefully there. Zealous, enthusiastic, on fire for the Lord's cause, rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, now here's a map, and I thought this map is, you know, kind of shows you a general idea. Notice, and I don't have the other map to show you, but the next one will show it better, that there's a section over here that looks kind of new. That the shape over here was kind of like maybe a comma or something, the way it was shaped. And some more has brought it out here till it's more of a, you know, not a square, but, you know, not like the other one. Here's the thing. By the time our history books were written today, there were no signs in Jerusalem saying, here is the sheep gate. Here is the water gate. Here is the dung gate. Here is where Nehemiah built the wall. Okay, there are no signs for that. Those things are covered up by years and years of people being in Jerusalem. And archaeologists have to come in and find something and then decide that this is part of the original walls of Jerusalem. Well, not original, but from the second temple anyway, the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. And they have to determine that they're genuinely that. And then they can try to piece it all together. Well, people who are experts in the history of that part of the world and in archaeology don't always even agree. So some people will tell you that the outer edge of all of what you see there represents the walls that Nehemiah rebuilt or led the people to rebuild. Others will say, no, we really haven't proven that yet, and we may not have. But whatever represented the city walls at that time, we know that Nehemiah rebuilt them. Now, and some of these, of course, were added on later on. Now, here's the better picture, I think, because it's colored, for one thing, and kind of shows you. So you see this little section over here on the right. That is, notice the key up there, the city of David, where Mount Zion is right there. That was Jerusalem during David's time. You know, that was where Jerusalem started at. Okay? And then additions by Solomon. You get up into the light area there, and Solomon builds the temple on Mount Moriah. Over here, additions by Hezekiah. That's the kind of light beige or whatever you want to call it. And then the Hasmonean additions that were added on. And we're not sure where along here Nehemiah started and stopped on this on the left side of it. That's the point. The Hasmoneans, by the way, being the descendants of Maccabees, the period between the Testaments. We got First and Second Maccabees, books of history that are not biblical books, but they tell us a lot about the history of the Jews during that 200 so-called silent years between Malachi and John the Baptist, when there was revelation again. So anyway, as I said, there's no guide map for archaeologists to come in and say, oh, okay, well, here's what Jerusalem looked like, let's find it, and it's identified for us somehow. All of those, even some of the towers, are matters of dispute. But we do know that whatever was considered the walls of Jerusalem, whether it was a mile and a half around or 2.5 miles around, Nehemiah led the people to rebuild those walls. And all those gates and all those towers. Okay, Nehemiah chapter 4. Here we kind of leave behind just the discussion of who did what, who put in this section of bricks and so forth. And we move on to the construction continuing and then opposition. Opposition is where we have a lot to learn in the book of Nehemiah. The way that because of this united effort and this on fireness, make up a word there, on fireness that the people had, they accomplished what they did in spite of this opposition. So what happened when Sanballat, and by the way, you can call him Sanballat, Sanballat, you can call him most anything because you can find that somewhere on the internet pronounced that way, okay? If there's an official place, I'm not sure who it is. I don't know any Hebrew scholars in person. But so if you've always called it Sanballat, whatever, you keep on calling it that. We all know who we're talking about. Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall. He was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. He didn't give them a lot of respect. He didn't think, that they hadn't built it up until now. He probably didn't think they'd build it with these few people that came with Nehemiah. Why would that happen? So now he finds out, hey, the bricks are going, the stones are going in, the walls are going up. We've got to stop this. And he spoke before his brethren and the army of Samaria. And these are the people up north of them. And by the way, all the Samaritans were not against the Jews rebuilding, okay? Some of them were. But we read, here later on that some of them were not. They were for them. In fact, some of them helped out. So, but Sanballat had a considerable force of soldiers, if he wanted to use them. And he says, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? That's been taken to mean that he was asking, are they going to sacrifice to God and somehow God is going to magically make those walls grow? I don't know if that was the actual meaning or not. That's what some have suggested as they read this. Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? there was some sort of new supernatural thing. Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burned? What about the usability of a stone that was burned? Is that good as a fresh stone? No, they're brittle and breakable, aren't they? They already have cracks in them you don't know about. So, in some ways, they didn't have the best of materials, but they had the best architect, and that was God. So, he's making fun of them. This was his first and the enemy's first approach at stopping them. Let's just mock them. Let's humiliate them. Let's ridicule them. And what we read suggests that was bothering the people, hearing all of this. Apparently he went to the place there. He got close enough that even the workers could hear him, or at least word got around. And it was like, what do these people think they're doing? This is so ridiculous. And he wasn't the only one, as we'll read. Tobiah the Ammonite. The Ammonites, remember, were over to the east, one of those three nations that right on the side of Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea, the Ammonites, Ammon there, was beside him, and he said, whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, it will break down the stone wall. In other words, it is absolutely a worthless wall. It is weak, it won't survive, it won't protect you. So, sometimes opposition does that to Christians, don't they? They ridicule, they mock, they make fun. So it's nothing new if they do. And this probably wasn't the first time. It's one of the most obvious situations in the Old Testament that we read about where somebody was making fun of people who were doing the right thing with God's approval. But it's not new to make fun of somebody, to try to discourage them from doing what is right that for whatever the reason you don't want them to do. In this case, it was purely selfish. It was self-interest. Sanballat and Tobiah, they had control of their areas. They did not want the Jews to reestablish and have control of their area. They could pick on them that way. They could basically rule them in sort of an unwritten way. So, Nehemiah prays to God in what is called, when we study the Psalms, we did this, a year or two ago, in an imprecatory method, an imprecatory way. That means he called upon God to recognize the evil that was being used against his people who were doing what he told them to do, he wanted them to do, and asking God, seek justice for us. We're not going to take it into our own hands. We're not vigilantes, but Lord, we call upon you to make this right, to take care of these people who don't respect you and are going to try to oppose and hurt your people. That's an imprecatory sense. And we see that in a lot of Psalms. We see it a little bit here with Nehemiah. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own heads and give them as plunder to a land of captivity. That's pretty strong words, isn't it? Do not cover their iniquity. Do not let their sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders. They've been making fun of them. They're discouraging them. We'll never get this wall built if everybody gets discouraged. And we know, Lord, that you want this wall built. And we know that they're ungodly people who don't worship you and don't serve you. So we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Tremendous number of lessons there. Particularly the people had a mind to work. But what Nehemiah prays for here in this rather short prayer is calling upon God for an imprecatory response. Because these people were deserving of God's anger. So Nehemiah wasn't saying, just do it. They've hurt us, I want you to hurt them. He was saying, Lord, they're opposing you. And so we're asking you to make this right. To give them the punishment that they deserve for what they've done. Then it happened that Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, and they became very angry. They were angry before, indignant. But now they're all angry. It's spread around all around this little place called Jerusalem in Judea. And all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. Notice, we got Sanballat, he was up there with the Samaritans in the north. Tobiah, he was with the Ammonites over here to the east. And the Ashdodites, remember what city Ashdod was part of? Philistines. He was one of their city-states. They had 5 of them, huge city-states. They didn't have a centralized government among the Philistines. What did they think of Jews? What did they think of David, their predecessor? No, they didn't like them. And then the Arabs, they were in the south with Geshem, however you pronounce that. So guess what? We've got the Jews surrounded by nations that do not want them to rebuild their walls. So I got this map here. There's Judah. Okay, you look over here. There's Ammon, the Ammonites, Tobiah. Look up above. There's Samaria, the Samaritans with Sanballat. There's Philistines, the city of Ashdod down there. And down here somewhere, Geshem with Arab tribes. We aren't sure, the historians aren't sure exactly where they live, but somewhere to the south. They were surrounded by people that didn't want anything good to happen to them, and certainly didn't want the walls of Jerusalem to be built. They were surrounded by enemies. Sort of like Israel today, really. So, they were living in a hostile world, surrounded by opposition, but as I suggested already, they had the best architect in the world, because he'd already built the universe, and he could see that the wall got built too. And God was their architect. Nevertheless, we made our prayer to our God, and because of them, that is all these nations that were going to come together and attack, and we would surmise that's going to be a pretty good sized force if they all got together. All those nations and all their soldiers came at once. It would have been quite a force for the Jews to deal with without God. And because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. In other words, we were watching. And in fact, there was a plan that was not supposed to get out, but it did, that this was going to happen. And some of the Samaritans were part of that plan getting to the ears of the Jews. So they knew they were coming. There wasn't going to be any surprise. Surprise attacks, what they had in mind. But that wasn't going to happen, because Nehemiah's people found out about it, and then all these enemies found out that they'd found out. So the element of surprise, as they say in the movies, wasn't there anymore. Then Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing, and there's so much rubbish that we're not able to build the wall. In other words, we're worn out and we've got a lot left to do. We've got it halfway up. But these people are getting tired. They're probably a little bit discouraged too, you think, from the comments that they heard their enemies say. Nobody likes for their works to be made fun of, do they? That hurts. And so they were hurt. They were tired. And they could have been thinking about the numbers if all those enemies were to go together and try to come up against them and stop the work. And our adversaries said, here's the secret plot part. They will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. Surprise attack. They're not even going to know this is going to happen. They'll be lifting their stones up on the wall. They'll already be tired. They won't be armed. Man, we'll just come in and wipe them out, and that'll be the end of the walls of Jerusalem. That was the plan. So it was when the Jews who dwelt near them came that they told us 10 times, in other words, over and over, we want you to know this. And that's interpreted to be some of the Samaritans. Because remember, there were Jews who were left, there were a few who were left from Babylonian captivity. And of course, some of them didn't intermarry, but some of them intermarried, and we have the Samaritans. But apparently the Samaritans here, there were many who were sympathetic to what they were doing, and they told them 10 times. They told them over and over, from whatever place you turn, they will be upon us, is what the plan was. And so they advised them of this plan. Here's what Nehemiah did. I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the openings, and I set people according to their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And said to the nobles, to the leaders, and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord. This is the Lord's wall. Great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. In other words, it was personal to the Jews. It was personal to them. And he set them up there, and they recognized very quickly, we've got to defend our family. We've got to defend our houses. We've got to defend our purpose as a people. And they were prepared to do that, just as they were prepared to build the walls. And so he foiled the plan for the surprise attack because they were ready. And then they came to realize at some point, they know we can't do that anymore. As it turned out, they didn't do anything. And it happened when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had brought their plot to nothing. Isn't that exciting to read? Here's the bad guys outnumbering God's people. And of course, this happens in the Old Testament over and over, doesn't it? You know, the bad guys outnumber them. But God brings the plot to nothing. That they all returned to the wall, everyone to his work. Didn't have to guard very long. As soon as the enemies realized that the plan to surprise attack had failed, they're ready to go back to work. Now, as we'll read later, Nehemiah didn't leave it at that. But that was the accomplishment. The enemies apparently did not have the backbone to go through with their plan if it wasn't a surprise attack, which tells us perhaps something about them. So it was that from that time on, half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held the spears, the shields, the bows, and wore armor. In other words, got half army here, half construction crew. And the leaders were behind all the house of Judah. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand they worked at construction and with the other hand a weapon. Which makes it even that much more amazing that it was done in 52 days. Because they were all ready for a fight if it came. It never came. The enemies apparently were a little bit cowardly. But in case it were to come, okay, I'm going to work, but I'm going to keep my weapon right here beside me, in my hand. I'm ready to defend Jerusalem if that's what it comes down to. So that was part of Nehemiah's plan. Constant vigilance. And of course, especially as we serve God today, if we're outnumbered in our cause, we need to be constantly vigilant, don't we? And the truth is, in this world, we are. We are outnumbered in our cause as far as head count. And so we want to be constantly vigilant about those who would destroy any images of Christianity, because there are those who hate it that much. Every one of the builders had his sword girded at his side as he built, and the one who sounded the trumpet was beside me. And I said to the nobles, the rulers, the rest of the people, the work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight with us. So Nehemiah put this plan into, we don't know where they might attack. It could just be one place, small number there, but I'll have my servant blow the trumpet, and everybody will go where they see the fighting takes place. Everybody will go there. And don't forget, while you're rallying there, God will fight for us. So Nehemiah, tremendous example of pray and prepare. That's what we're to do, right? The old saying was, work as if everything depended upon you, pray as if everything depended upon God. There's two sides to it. And we prepare. Nehemiah made the logical preparations to be successful in a battle, not be surprised, not be overtaken. And then, all throughout his relationship with this project, he's praying to God and reminding the people, God's with us. We don't need the numbers. We've got God with us, and that's all it's going to take. So we labored in the work, and half the men held the spears from daybreak till the stars appeared. You ever worked till the stars appeared? On the farm, you do that every once in a while. It's a long day, isn't it? Can you imagine moving those stones around all day long, and from the time there was daylight till the time the stars appeared? I said, well, better knock it off, get a couple of hours of sleep. We'll be back at it tomorrow. They worked hard. At the same time, I also said to the people, let each man and his servant stay at night in Jerusalem. See, they were from the other cities, roundabout cities too. He said, we need everybody here in case there's a battle. We need to have our numbers. That they may be our guard by night and a working party by day. You know, they had to do both things. Had to be vigilant and had to work on the wall. So neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me took off our clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. And I'm sure they did that in a very qualified way, with somebody still watching. You know, so a few people washing their clothes while other people were watching. He said, that's the only relaxation we had with doing laundry. That's kind of amazing, isn't it? Well, I had no idea we'd get through all that. But you see that word right there? That means we're through the slides. So, do you have comments? You may have a question, and if Josephus doesn't answer it, I may not can answer it either, but if you got a question or a comment, go ahead. Okay, just for the people watching and anybody that couldn't hear that, Sandy talks about the ongoing hatred between the Ammonites, the Edomites, and Israel, and it was ongoing. Remember when they came up to enter the Promised Land, they wouldn't even let them cross their land in some places. There was generation after generation of hatred, and unfortunately, it's probably easier, well, we know it's easier in the world for hatred to develop long term than it is for love between nations or peoples or even individuals, I suppose. It's easier to build up that hatred and not let it go. And it's still there today. And we still have people shooting rockets at each other. We still have people hating each other, enslaving each other in some parts of the world. So, yeah, it's hate that comes from evil there, and not letting something go. Anyone else? 2 minutes. I know you're all thinking, maybe he'll let us out early and we'd head on down for that cake, you know. You don't forget the cake tonight. We're saying bye to Yasser. He's not going to sleep between now and when he gets on the plane, and probably not then. He's leaving real early tomorrow morning. But we're having a little going away here thing for him. Not going to be long. Not going to be just a little cake. Nice cake, though. Good cake. Fellowship. Say bye to Yasser. I think you probably read the mail. He was baptized last night. And he's taking his faith back to Egypt. So pray for him. Okay, let's go.